There was a time when breakfast wasn't rushed or eaten on the go. It was a slow, comforting ritual that started the day right. In small southern towns and country kitchens across America, mornings smelled like sizzling bacon, hot biscuits, and rich gravies bubbling on the stove. These weren't fancy meals. They were born from necessity, made from pantry scraps, flour, drippings, and love. From chocolate gravy poured over fluffy biscuits to hoe cakes crisped on an iron skillet, each dish told a story about survival, resourcefulness, and the joy of simple living. When milk was scarce, cooks used cornmeal to thicken gravies. When sugar was a luxury, they reached for sorghum. Every bite carried the warmth of home and the pride of making something out of almost nothing. Today, we're revisiting those forgotten breakfast treasures, recipes that once defined America's morning table but have nearly vanished from memory. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's travel back to a time when flavor came from patience, not packaging. Welcome to America's Lost Recipes, where we bring back the breakfast that built a nation. Chocolate gravy and biscuits. Imagine waking up on a chilly morning in the Ozark Mountains, where the air smells like wood smoke and fresh coffee. In the kitchen, a cast iron skillet warms on the stove, and Grandma is whisking together flour, cocoa powder, sugar, and milk, not to make dessert, but breakfast. This was chocolate gravy and biscuits, a Southern favorite that turned humble ingredients into pure morning magic. Born in the Appalachian and Ozark regions, this dish became popular during the early 1900s when families had little but made much of what they had. Chocolate was rare, but cocoa powder was cheap and shelf-stable, a pantry miracle. Mothers would whisk it with milk and a touch of butter until it thickened into a rich, velvety sauce. Poured over warm, buttery biscuits, it created a breakfast that felt like celebration even during hard times. For many children, Sunday mornings meant gathering around the table, watching that glossy gravy drip down golden biscuits. It wasn't just food, it was love disguised as sweetness. The first bite was always unforgettable, warm, silky, slightly bitter from the cocoa, and deeply comforting. As processed cereals and toaster pastries took over American kitchens, chocolate gravy slowly disappeared, remembered only in a few Southern households and handwritten recipe cards. But for those who grew up with it, the memory remains powerful, the taste of home, family, and simpler times. So today, we bring it back, one spoonful of nostalgia at a time. Because in every drizzle of chocolate gravy lies a story of resilience, love, and the kind of joy only found in a homemade Southern breakfast. This is America's Lost Recipes, and this was chocolate gravy and biscuits. Redeye gravy ham biscuits. In the mountains of Tennessee and Kentucky, mornings often began with the aroma of ham sizzling in a cast-iron skillet. This was the birthplace of Redeye gravy ham biscuits, a breakfast born of simplicity, thrift, and Southern ingenuity. Families didn't waste a single scrap. A thick slice of country ham was fried until the edges crisped and the pan filled with a thin layer of rich, smoky fat. The secret to Redeye gravy lies in the coffee. After the ham was fried, strong black coffee was poured into the skillet to deglaze the fat, creating a deep reddish-brown sauce. Bitter, smoky, and savory all at once. This liquid gold would be drizzled over hot biscuits or served alongside the ham itself. It was a breakfast that felt indulgent, yet cost mere pennies, nourishing entire families before a long day of labor in the fields or forests. Redeye gravy dates back to the early 1800s and became a staple in Appalachian kitchens. Its name comes from the way the coffee floated atop the pan drippings, forming a dark circle resembling a red eye. This humble creation showcased the resourcefulness of mountain families, turning leftover coffee and scraps of meat into a flavor-packed dish that needed nothing else to feel complete. Over time, the tradition faded. As convenience foods replaced careful cooking and coffee makers changed the way coffee was brewed, fewer people mastered the delicate balance of flavor that Redeye gravy required. But those who remember it still hold a piece of history on their plates, a breakfast that was simple, bold, and utterly satisfying. Today, we honor this tradition. Every bite of Redeye gravy ham biscuits is a reminder that the heart of Southern cooking isn't in complexity. It's in creativity, care, and the stories passed down through generations. This is America's lost recipes, keeping the flavors of the past alive.
Milk gravy. Before fancy cream sauces and elaborate breakfast spreads, there was milk gravy, the simplest, most comforting white gravy Southern families could make. In kitchens across Appalachia and the rural South, mornings began with the gentle sound of milk being warmed over a cast iron skillet, ready to transform humble ingredients into a meal that felt like a hug on a plate. Milk gravy was often born out of necessity. When lard, bacon grease, or meat scraps were scarce, families relied on flour and milk to create a thick, creamy sauce. A small amount of butter or rendered fat was melted, flour whisked in until golden, and then warm milk slowly added while stirring continuously. The result was a silky, velvety gravy that clung perfectly to hot, freshly baked biscuits. Seasoned simply with salt and black pepper, it was a dish that didn't need extravagance to feel indulgent. Grandchildren would pull up chairs to the table, watching the steam curl from the skillet, anticipation building as the first spoonful was poured over biscuits. That bite, soft, creamy, and subtly sweet from the milk, was comfort in its purest form. Milk gravy wasn't just breakfast, it was a testament to ingenuity, stretching basic pantry staples into a meal that nourished both body and spirit. This dish thrived during hard times because it was inexpensive, quick, and satisfying. But as sawmill gravy, richer cream sauces, and modern breakfast trends gained popularity, milk gravy gradually slipped from everyday tables. Today, very few cooks remember the precise rhythm needed to whisk it just right, yet its memory lingers in the hearts of those who grew up with it. By revisiting milk gravy, we honor a recipe that taught families resilience, patience, and the joy of simple comfort food. Every creamy drizzle over a warm biscuit carries a story of Southern kitchens, resourcefulness, and a love that didn't need anything more than milk, flour, and a little care. Fried cornmeal mush. Long before instant cereals or boxed grits, mornings in Appalachian kitchens revolved around fried cornmeal mush. This hearty breakfast was simple, yet required patience and care, turning basic ingredients into a dish that fed both body and soul. Cornmeal, cooked into a thick, concrete-like block the night before, would sit overnight to firm up. Come morning, the mush was sliced into thick slabs and fried in sizzling lard or meat grease until golden and crisp on the outside, soft and creamy inside. For many mountain families, fried cornmeal mush was more than sustenance. It was economical, feeding a large household for just a few pennies, yet satisfying enough to fuel a full day of work in the fields or forest. Children would gather around the stove, drawn by the rich aroma, their eyes following the skillet as each golden slice was lifted onto plates. Served with molasses, sorghum, or leftover meat scraps, it transformed into a complete, filling meal that could rival any modern breakfast. This dish has roots in colonial America, passed down through generations and adapted in the mountains for resourcefulness. The careful preparation, the patience in letting the cornmeal firm, and the art of frying each slice just right, all reflected a rhythm of life that honored both food and family. By the 1980s, convenience foods, instant grits, and ready-made cereals began replacing traditional dishes like this, pushing fried cornmeal mush toward obscurity. Yet for those who remember, its taste evokes mornings of laughter, warmth, and togetherness, the kind of simple joy modern kitchens rarely replicate. Recreating fried cornmeal mush today isn't just about eating, it's about reconnecting with a piece of American culinary history. Every crisp-edged slice carries the story of resilience, thrift, and the flavors that shaped a generation. This is America's Lost Recipes, keeping the breakfasts of the past alive for the present. Ash cakes. Before ovens were common and cookware was a luxury, families across the American frontier relied on a simple, rugged dish known as ash cakes. These humble cornmeal patties were cooked directly on the glowing embers of a campfire, no skillet, no pan, just the earth and the flame. Yet somehow, from those ashes emerged something extraordinary, smoky, golden flatbreads that carried the taste of survival and home. Ash cakes trace their roots back to Native American cooking traditions, later adopted by early settlers, pioneers, and soldiers during the Civil War. Cornmeal was often the only grain available, and mixing it with water and a pinch of salt created a dough sturdy enough to bake in hot ashes. Once cooked, the ash was brushed away, revealing a rustic, smoky bread with a crisp crust and soft, tender center, simple, nourishing, and deeply satisfying. For frontier families, ash cakes weren't just food, they were endurance in edible form. They fueled long journeys, comforted soldiers by campfires, and fed children in log cabins where every crumb mattered. Often eaten with molasses, bacon drippings, or sorghum syrup, each bite carried the faint sweetness of smoke and the warmth of the fire that baked it. By the 20th century, modern stoves and pre-packaged bread pushed ash cakes into memory. But those who once tasted them never forgot. The flavor wasn't just in the cornmeal, it was in the story of hard times, resourcefulness, and the shared comfort of gathering around a fire. Reviving ash cakes today is like breathing life into the oldest form of American home cooking. They remind us that even from ashes, something beautiful and delicious can rise again. This is America's Lost Recipes, where history still warms the hearth. Tomato gravy on biscuits. In southern kitchens, where the scent of bacon grease and fresh biscuits filled the air, tomato gravy on biscuits was a dish that turned hardship into comfort. Born from the Great Depression and perfected through generations, this vibrant, tangy gravy proved that even a humble can of tomatoes could create something extraordinary when paired with love and a hot skillet. The recipe was simple but soulful: bacon or sausage drippings whisked with flour to form a roux, then mixed with crushed or stewed tomatoes, salt, and a touch of sugar to balance the acidity. Slowly simmered, it thickened into a velvety red sauce that clung to fluffy biscuits like a warm southern hug. For many families, this was breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner, a flavorful reminder that creativity could stretch even the smallest pantry. Grandmothers remembered it as poor man's gravy, yet the taste was anything but poor. The tang of tomatoes blended with the smoky undertone of the drippings, creating a depth of flavor few modern dishes can match. Children would sop up every last drop, laughing around kitchen tables lit by morning sun. It was messy, it was hearty, and it was real. As the decades passed, tomato gravy faded from breakfast tables, replaced by store-bought sauces and fast food mornings. But for those who grew up with it, that first bite still brings back the warmth of cast-iron skillets and family laughter echoing through small kitchens. Reviving tomato gravy on biscuits today isn't just about nostalgia, it's about honoring the cooks who made something magical out of almost nothing. It's proof that the simplest recipes often hold the deepest memories. This is America's Lost Recipes, keeping the stories and flavors of our grandmother's kitchens alive, one biscuit at a time. Bulldog gravy with biscuits. There was a time when families could stretch a few pantry scraps into a breakfast that felt like a feast. Bulldog gravy with biscuits was born out of that spirit, a Depression-era staple that turned desperation into deliciousness. No one really knows why it was called Bulldog gravy. Some say it was because it stuck to your ribs like a bulldog's grip, others claim it was named for its bold, no-nonsense flavor. Either way, it became a southern favorite in hard times when money was scarce but pride in home cooking ran deep. The base was simple: flour, brown and leftover bacon grease or sausage drippings, a splash of milk or water, and plenty of black pepper. Some cooks added a pinch of salt, pork or onions if they had them, but the real beauty of bulldog gravy was in its simplicity. Thick, peppery, and slightly smoky, it was poured generously over warm biscuits, often the only thing on the table, yet somehow enough to make everyone smile. Children growing up in the 1930s and 40s remember those mornings vividly, the clatter of the whisk, the smell of sizzling fat, and the first comforting bite of biscuits soaked in rich, savory gravy. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest, the kind of meal that reminded folks that even in lean times, flavor and love could still fill a home. As prosperity grew and breakfast menus evolved, Bulldog gravy quietly disappeared, overshadowed by modern recipes and restaurant plates. But for those who remember it, this dish holds more than flavor, it holds the memory of perseverance and family. Bringing back Bulldog gravy with biscuits is more than nostalgia, it's a tribute to resilience, creativity, and the unbreakable American spirit that made something out of nothing. This is America's Lost Recipes, reviving the flavors that built our mornings. Hoe cakes. Long before pancakes flipped on electric griddles, there were hoe cakes, the South's original cornmeal flatbreads cooked on the very tools used to till the earth. Enslaved Africans and early settlers first made them in the 1700s, mixing cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt into a simple batter, then frying them on the flat side of a hoe blade held over an open fire. What began as a necessity became a cherished symbol of Southern resilience and ingenuity. The name might sound rugged, but the flavor was anything but. Crisp at the edges and tender in the center, hoe cakes carried the earthy sweetness of corn and the smoky touch of the fire. When topped with butter, honey, or syrup, they became a meal that felt rich, even when ingredients were scarce. For many rural families, this was breakfast, lunch, or even dinner, a warm reminder that the simplest food could still bring joy. As time passed, hoe cakes moved from fields to farmhouse kitchens, where they were cooked on cast-iron skillets instead of tools. Every family had its own version, some thin like pancakes, others thick and hearty like cornbread fritters. They were often served with beans, greens, or molasses, feeding generations who understood that flavor didn't come from fancy ingredients, but from love, fire, and patience. Today, hoe cakes have nearly vanished, replaced by instant mixes and frozen waffles. But each golden round tells a story of survival, creativity, and the deep connection between land and table. Reviving hoe cakes means more than recreating a recipe, it means honoring the hands that worked the fields, cooked by firelight, and built traditions that still feed our souls. This is America's Lost Recipes, where every bite carries the taste of history. Cornmeal gravy in biscuits. In the quiet kitchens of the American South, when meat was scarce and money tighter still, cornmeal gravy in biscuits became a symbol of survival and comfort. It was a dish that proved flavor didn't need luxury, just a little ingenuity, a cast-iron skillet, and a warm heart behind the stove. This old-fashioned gravy began with something every rural family had on hand: cornmeal. Unlike flour gravies, this one started by toasting cornmeal in bacon grease or lard until golden brown, releasing a nutty aroma that filled the kitchen. Then came the milk or water, poured in slowly as Grandma stirred and stirred, watching it thicken into a creamy, rustic sauce with a gentle grit and smoky depth. Salt and black pepper were the only seasonings needed, the flavor spoke for itself. When poured over hot, flaky biscuits, cornmeal gravy transformed breakfast into an act of love. The texture was heartier than traditional milk gravy, and the taste rich, roasted, and slightly sweet lingered long after the meal ended. For families living through the Great Depression or post-war hard times, it offered both nourishment and comfort, a reminder that simple food could still feel like a feast. Some called it poor man's gravy, but those who grew up with it never felt poor while eating it. Around those wooden kitchen tables, the laughter, the warmth, and the smell of biscuits baking were enough to make anyone feel rich. As processed foods and modern breakfasts took over, cornmeal gravy and biscuits quietly disappeared from most tables. But for those who remember it, that first creamy, corn-scented bite still carries the taste of family, home, and hope. This is America's Lost Recipes, where even the simplest meals tell stories worth remembering. Sorghum on biscuits. Long before supermarket syrup bottles lined the shelves, Southern kitchens relied on a natural, golden sweetener known as sorghum. Families would gather around the press during harvest season, extracting thick, rich molasses from locally grown sorghum cane. This liquid gold wasn't just a treat, it was a staple, sweetening breakfasts, baked goods, and even savory dishes in times when sugar was scarce or expensive. One of the simplest, yet most beloved ways to enjoy sorghum was poured over hot, fresh biscuits. Imagine breaking open a fluffy, buttery biscuit, then watching the amber syrup slowly drizzle and soak into every crevice. Sometimes a pat of butter was added first, melting into the biscuit and combining with the deep, earthy sweetness of the sorghum. Each bite was a balance of soft, warm bread, creamy butter, and complex sweetness, a taste that store-bought syrups could never replicate. Sorghum syrup, often called long sweetening, earned its name because its rich flavor lingered on the tongue, providing energy for long workdays on farms and in the fields. For children and adults alike, a simple breakfast of biscuits with sorghum was more than nourishment, it was comfort, warmth, and a reminder of home. By the mid-20th century, industrial sugar and corn syrup began to replace sorghum in most kitchens. What was once a staple became a rarity, remembered fondly only in old family cookbooks and the memories of elders. Yet those who grew up with it still recall the smell of hot biscuits, the sweetness of the syrup, and the feeling of abundance it created from modest ingredients. Reviving sorghum on biscuits today is a way to honor that heritage, a taste of tradition, thrift, and southern ingenuity. Every pour carries the story of a time when flavor came from patience, care, and the bounty of the land. This is America's Lost Recipes, bringing back the breakfasts that shaped a nation. Cornbread and milk. In the mountains and valleys of the South, breakfast didn't need to be elaborate to be cherished. Cornbread and milk was a humble, practical, yet deeply satisfying morning ritual that nourished families with simplicity and love. Long before boxed cereals and sugary cereals dominated tables, leftover cornbread from the night before was paired with fresh, cold milk, often buttermilk, to create a meal that was as comforting as it was economical. Cornbread, baked in iron skillets over open flames or in rustic wood-fired ovens, carried a golden crust and a soft, tender interior. Each slice, broken or crumbled, soaked up the milk, creating a creamy, slightly tangy texture that was perfect for starting the day. For children, the sweetness from buttermilk or a drizzle of molasses was enough to make mornings feel special, even in the toughest households. The beauty of cornbread and milk was in its accessibility. Families who raised their own corn and milked their cows could enjoy a hearty breakfast without spending a dime. It was cheap, quick, and filling, ideal for farm families who needed energy for long hours of work in the fields, barns, or forests. By the 1970s, packaged breakfast cereals began to replace this simple tradition. Modern convenience shifted tables away from cornbread and milk, leaving it a fading memory of frugal ingenuity. Yet for those who grew up with it, every bite evokes nostalgia, the smell of fresh cornbread, the cool tang of milk, and the warmth of a kitchen where love was the main ingredient. Revisiting cornbread and milk today isn't just about eating, it's about preserving a tradition that shaped American breakfasts. Each creamy, crumb-filled bite is a reminder that comfort and nourishment don't require extravagance, only care, and a connection to the simple pleasures of home. This is America's Lost Recipes, celebrating the meals that kept families fed and hearts full.